During the first week of my retirement, my son looked me straight in the eye and told me, "We do not need another mouth to feed around here." The next morning, he proudly announced he had found me a janitor job at his own company. I smiled and nodded and let him believe I was grateful. Beneath that polite smile, something colder moved. He thought he was teaching me humility. He did not realize that I had already started teaching him a lesson that would change his life forever. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Nathan sat at the head of the table like a manager at a meeting. Amanda was to his right hand, resting on the breadbasket ring, catching the stove light. I kept my eyes on the knife beside my plate. When I lifted it, the blade kissed porcelain. A soft tap, then another. The sound landed right where a pulse would be. Nathan talked about rent, utilities, and groceries that kept climbing. He said the numbers never stopped getting bigger, except for one thing: his patience. Amanda added that plenty of people my age worked. The father of her friend bagged groceries, and everyone at church adored him for staying active. She called for that purpose. The words sat there neat, like something that had been practiced in front of a mirror. I told them I understood, that I did not want to be a strain on the house. Nathan blinked as if he had expected a contest, and I had offered him a handshake. He nodded, encouraged by the lack of friction, and said there was an opening in facilities at Eastwell he could put in a word. He said it would be good for me. Structure, responsibility, all the right syllables for a speech about adulthood. Amanda said she would print a simple budget for the week and we could see how my paycheck helped. She said celebrate would be the wrong word. We would simply note it. She smiled at this, proud of her precision. Nathan started to outline what Monday would look like. Wake early, leave by 6:30. No confusion about the start time because lateness was a poor look. He said he would email his supervisor that night to confirm my name. I said I appreciated the help. My voice stayed even. Evenness in this house had become a kind of provocation. Amanda lifted her glass and took a measured sip. She said this could be a turning point for all of us. She used that phrase in a way that made me think of a wheel aligned at last. Nathan leaned back and folded his arms. He said there would be no coasting. He said everyone contributes. He said it twice. The repetition was not a mistake. It was a belief. My knife tapped the plate one more time. I set it down. The stove light held its soft glow, and I let myself notice it once and only once, because attention has its limits and so do metaphors. I looked up at my son. I told him I would start on Monday. He exhaled in relief and allowed himself a small grin. Victory. Amanda smiled wider. She asked if I could rinse the dishes since I was not working at the moment, and it would help the house tonight. Nathan said to Amanda. She answered with a shrug. We are all contributing. I gathered the plates and carried them to the sink. The faucet coughed, then ran clear. Steam lifted. I rinsed slowly to steady my hands. Behind me, their voices shifted register. They spoke about a show they were finishing, a knock in the car engine, something at work that would require a late night. It was not cruelty. Not yet. It was the opposite. It was ordinary life resuming immediately after a sentence that remade a family. That is its own kind of cruelty. I stacked the plates in the rack and dried my hands. Nathan reminded me about the start time, 7, be early. He would check in at lunch to see how it had gone. I told him that it would not be necessary. He said it would make him feel better. Amanda added that first impressions matter. I nodded. I turned off the water and crossed the room. I clicked the stove light off. Darkness tucked itself around the kitchen without ceremony. On my way down the hall, I passed the frames that held the usual collection. School photos with uneven haircuts, a backyard grin after a Little League win. My wife is in a sundress with a watering can. The glass of each frame did what glass always does. It reflected whatever stood in front of it and kept its own secrets behind a shine. I did not stop long. I knew every picture by weight. My room was at the back of the house. Bed, dresser, lamp with a stubborn switch. I closed the door and let the quiet settle. The quiet of a house after a verdict is different from the quiet of peace. It is stillness that expects you to sign something. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened. Pipe adjusting, a neighbor's car door, the faint edge of laughter from the living room, clipped and efficient. When the noise receded, I reached for my notebook. A cheap spiral, a blue pen. I wrote the facts the same way I had written them for years at work when numbers needed a trail. Monday, facilities, Eastwell, Arrange through Nathan. Everyone contributes. Do not be late. Note first paycheck. I underlined the note. Words leave fingerprints when people are not looking. That one wore Amanda's perfume and Nathan's worry. I wrote their phrasing exactly as they had said it. That is how you keep a story honest. Not by the feeling of it, but by the weight of the words that were actually used. I wrote something else under the list. It was not a plan so much as an observation placed where I could not pretend later that it had been an accident. People behave differently when they think they know who you are. Show them a version of yourself that matches their needs, and they will perform theirs without disguise. My part was easy. Agree. Smile. Keep the pace steady. Old accountants do not fear long games. They are how the totals make sense. From the living room, Amanda's phone chimed. She answered. I could not make out the words, just the shape of them, the clean edges of busy people working efficiently on a calendar that put them in the center. Nathan's voice joined hers lower and slower the way a man speaks when he is sure of the floor beneath him. I lay back and let their conversation become a hum. The hum did what background noise always does. It granted me privacy. Grief did not enter the room. That surprised me a little. I had expected a version of it to slip in and ask for a chair. In its place was something steadier. It did not ask for attention. It took a seat in the corner and waited. I recognized it after a minute of letting it be. It was the simple knowledge that I had trained my son to believe in results, and he had become the kind of man who mistook performance for love. Perhaps all fathers do this, and then discover late that they were grading the wrong exam. I thought of the mornings I had left before dawn for years on end. The lunches are packed in paper bags. The checks I had written were not signed with my name across the event, or rather the checks I had signed by deciding not to be seen. The house called that generosity. My body called it a habit. Both were true and both had a price. The bill had arrived. Nathan had presented it like a manager reading a policy update. No tremor in his voice. A man should admire the clarity even as he refuses the conclusion. The notebook lay open. I turned to a clean page and drew a single neat line across it. That was all. A line is a promise. Not to hurt, not to humiliate, to balance, to return to zero without shouting. In the morning, I would rinse a cup and nod at whatever version of respect they wanted to rehearse before work. I would keep my face simple. I would let compliance do its job. I stood and switched the lamp off. The room darkened into a shape I knew. I rested my hand on the door and thought of one more thing I wanted written down, but words did not need ink to hold. They can sit where they belong and keep their edge. I took a breath, felt it travel clean, and stepped back to the bed. The mattress protested, then settled. I heard Nathan walk past my door. The hallway floor creaked in the same place it had creaked the year we moved in. Amanda's steps followed a moment later. A faucet turned. Then quiet. The kind of quiet that pretends it is neutral. I lay still inside it until the house felt like a closed book. People tell you what they value by what they make you repeat. Tonight, Nathan made me repeat that everyone contributes. I had contributed more than anyone at that table could remember. I did not need them to remember. I needed them to keep saying it out loud until the words did their final math. I turned on my side and let my eyes close. Sleep did not come fast. It never does when a ledger turns a page. A thought circled once, simple and without heat. If you think I am a burden, then let us see what happens when I stop carrying it. I gave him my time, my savings, and the roof above his head. He gave me a bill. It was not printed on paper. It arrived as a sentence delivered without tremor during an ordinary weeknight. I lay in the dark and let the words take their seat. They did not shout. They did not need to. They knew I understood the math. The house was quiet in the way old houses learn to be. A pipe in the wall cleared its throat. Somewhere down the block, a car door thudded, and then the night stitched itself back together. On the dresser, the little wind-up clock my wife loved waited patiently. I reached over and turned the key in its back, felt the spring take the tension and set it upright again. When I was a young man, that sound of ticking meant forward. Tonight, it meant something else. The hands were not my enemy. They were witnesses. They had stood in rooms like this with us through every small victory and every small unkindness that never made a scene. I rested my palm against the cool wood of the dresser and let the memory open. Fluorescent lights that hummed without mercy. Accounting ledgers lined up like soldiers who never spoke unless you knew the words to call them into formation. The old beige computer that needed 3 minutes to wake up, the smell of toner, a ring of coffee evaporating into a ghost on the corner of a report, a window that looked over a parking lot and the same cracked lane you learned to aim for because you were too tired to aim for anything else. Those nights were their own country. The only language was numbers, and the only weather was fatigue moving through the body like fog that learns your name and still calls you sir. There were days when I took the early bus, and days when I stayed late enough to see the cleaning crew arrive, men and women who made the lights look honest. I learned their names, and they learned mine, and we nodded the way people nod when their lives share a border and no one patrols it. Work does not ask if you are ready. It shows up with a list. You check off what you can promise to finish what you did not, and learn to live with the rest sitting like a stack of paper waiting for your hands. I did not resent it. I understood the bargain. That understanding built a roof and kept a refrigerator humming and fed a boy who would one day teach me a different lesson about ledgers. In that long parade of shifts, certain hours glow brighter because a voice stepped through. "Do not worry, son, I will figure it out." The words left my mouth more times than anyone recorded. The furnace that died in the deepest week of January, the braces the dentist recommended and Nathan hated for 3 months and then forgot he had them. The new water heater that came in a cardboard coffin stamped with warnings and hope. The slow leak in the roof that only spoke when rain found it and taught the kitchen to listen. I learned how to be the first call. I enjoyed being that man. It felt like an authority that asked for nothing except attention. One night after a year that felt longer than the calendar promised, I sat across from a man named Robert in a garage that smelled of sawdust and ambition. He had a stack of sketches for a production line that did not exist yet, and a laugh that arrived half a second after his smile as if he still could not quite believe in his good ideas. He spoke about a company he wanted to build. He needed someone who understood that numbers are not just answers, but stories. I had some money then. Not the kind that buys boats, the kind that buys time if you spend it carefully. Overtime had given me small hills of cash that most people would have turned into a new car or a second bathroom. My wife and I turned them into a single belief. If we saw a man we trusted, we would trust him with more than talk. I did not draw attention to what we did. I called it a loan so the world would not arrive with its opinions. It was not a loan. It was a belief folded into paper and signatures and a handshake that was not necessary but mattered. $500,000 looks different depending on who is counting. In that garage, it looked like a factory floor that would one day be busy at dawn. It looked like paychecks printed with names we did not know yet. It looked like a story that would employ the kind of men and women I had been learning the names of at 2 a.m. Robert promised nothing he could not say without blinking. It was enough. We opened a path that would not be named after me. That suited me. I did not tell Nathan. He was a boy then who believed the world formed itself each morning like a school day. He wanted rides and snacks and the bottom of a cereal box. He did not need the weight of men talking in garages. Later, when he was old enough to have learned disgust for what he called old stories, I did not tell him for a different reason. I wanted to know the shape of his character without the gravity of inheritance. Money bends rooms the way a heavy table makes you walk around it, even if you are in a hurry. I wanted to see which doors he would open if all the doors looked the same. Eastwell Industries did not rise overnight, though there were mornings when it felt like the sun had been hired by the company. I saw the name arrive on billboards and job listings. I saw their logo on clipboards carried by men in hard hats. I watched the stock tickers mention it in a voice that meant pay attention. Dividends arrived, and I handled them with the same care I used for my grocery receipt. Sometimes I reinvested. Sometimes I left the money exactly where it landed. I built a quiet set of ledgers for a life that did not demand applause. In the years after my wife died, those ledgers reminded me that progress can whisper. The clock on the dresser ticked like a patient foot tapping under a table. I thought about the first time I brought Nathan to the office. He must have been 9. He sat at my desk and traced the outline of the stapler on a yellow pad. He wanted to play with the rubber stamp that said received, and I let him mark a scrap of paper. He hit the pad too hard and the green ink bled through to the blotter. He looked up in a panic and I told him not to worry. Paper forgives. He smiled and made the word again softer. careful now that he knew strength did not always mean force. Later that afternoon, when a client arrived and I needed to be sharper than a father visiting his own pride, Nathan moved aside without my reminding him. He understood something essential that day. Rooms change when certain people enter. It is not always about status. Sometimes it is about responsibility. I wish I had written that down for myself with the same ink he used. The night leaned its shoulder against the window. I could feel the house breathe more evenly now that everyone had chosen their corner. I wound the clock a second time because habit is a possession you do not need to sell, and then for reasons I did not expect, I let the clock run down. I watched the thin hand struggle at the last inch of its courage, then stop. The stillness that followed was not dramatic. It was clean. Retirement does that to certain instruments. It does not kill them. It pauses them until you decide what sound you want next. I sat again and let one more memory speak. A phone call late on a Thursday when the economy seemed tired. Robert was asking for advice he could trust. He wanted to expand a line. He wanted to do it without pretending forecasts were wishes. I went through the model with him until we found the place where hope had eaten a number that did not want to be eaten. We cut that corner and the line opened 3 months later without surprise. I remember leaving the garage that night and smelling cut grass from some neighbor who did not know he had provided the scent that would remind me of integrity. When I think of Eastwell, I think of that call and the way Robert thanked me with words that did not break. Partner, he said, not as a title, as a description. Nathan does not know any of this. He knows a different set of facts. He knows that the man he calls dad has a quiet house at the back of his own house. He knows a fridge that carries simple food and a dresser that refuses to be revarnished because its scars mark days that mattered. He knows I am a man who says yes to small requests and is careful where he stands in photos. He knows I do not ask for much. He does not know what I asked of myself and what I gave to a company that signs his paychecks. He believes he picked me up this week and set me gently in a place called responsibility. He will sleep better for thinking that. For now. The clock did not argue. It stared back, both hands paused where I left them. I could hear the faintest sound of wind beginning in the maple outside. It threaded itself through the eaves like a whisper learning its lines. I breathed with it. The thing about generosity is that it never draws a receipt, and yet a ledger forms anyway. Not by your choice, by theirs. Every repeated slight adds a digit. Every careless instruction moves a comma. The total waits. It has the patience of a cold season. I closed my eyes and could still see the garage, the sketches, the coffee ring on the corner of a dream. I could still feel the envelope I handed over the paper thick enough to make the moment real. I could hear my wife's laugh from a year when her laugh was a chair you could sit in and rest. She trusted my judgment. I trusted Robert's honesty. The company grew up under both. Years later, Robert would touch my shoulder the way a man does when thanks needs a place to land. We never signed each other's names on walls. We did not need to. I lay back and let the mattress take my weight. The night had a different sound now. It was not the sound of a man hurt. It was the sound of someone remembering the value of his own decisions. I thought of Nathan saying everyone contributes with the confidence of a person who forgot how many times he had eaten what appeared on the table without asking who paid for the heat that cooked it. There is no tragedy here. There is only a rhythm and a change in tempo. If he believes I owe the house, let him count. Let him use a calculator with buttons that click loudly enough to make him feel like a judge. Numbers will keep their nature. They will not betray what they have already said. The wind pressed once against the window and then settled into a steady hush. I reached out and touched the stopped clock. The metal felt like a coin slept on and found again. I let my hand fall back to the sheet and listened to the room breathe. Somewhere past the walls, the city adjusted itself for morning that would come whether I wanted it or not. In that certainty, there was comfort. I do not need apologies to sleep. I need only the truth. The truth was simple. For 4 decades, I had paid forward. Tonight, I understood that unpaid interest is collected on a different ledger. It does not arrive with anger. It arrives with clarity. Walls are thin in this house, thin enough to hear betrayal breathing. I was not trying to listen. Night had its own business to attend to, and I had mine. But sound has a way of slipping through paint and drywall like water finding a seam. The television in the next room played a show with canned laughter that arrived half a second too late to be real. Under it, a teaspoon circled a mug with precise little taps, metal on ceramic. Tap, pause, tap, tap. The kind of rhythm people make when they are softening the edge of hard sentences. Nathan spoke first, voice pitched to seem reasonable. He said the rent would crush us if we did not make decisions. He said my retirement had been a surprise he could not absorb. He said the words budget and boundaries the way a man recites a creed. Amanda let the spoon circle again, then set it against the saucer. Her voice arrived smooth, managerial, the same tone she used when she wanted a room to move with her. She said the phrase retirement fund as if it were a misplaced tool she intended to pick up and put somewhere useful. She said we could streamline household costs if that deposit came to the right account. She did not have to say which account. The pronoun carried the whole plan. Dead weight. That is what Nathan called me when he forgot I had ears. He did not spit it. He set it down as a fact. He said it softly like he was trying not to wake a child. I lay on my side and watched the faint rectangle of light under my door breathe with the television's changes in brightness. A commercial brightened the room to a pale white, then receded to the gray of drama. The sitcom laughter returned. It had learned to share space with hushed plotting. Amanda said she had spoken with a friend who handled benefits and knew exactly how to arrange automatic transfers. She said it was cleaner if we took care of it before things got messy. She said messy like a warning label. Nathan asked how we would convince him. He was me. He did not say my name. People rename you when they are preparing an exit. Amanda stirred again and the spoon clicked against the rim, a small bell for the next line. She said we would be kind, that kindness makes signatures easier. We would print the forms. We would emphasize how stressful bills had become. We would use words like simplify and protect and transparency. She did not say control because control is a naked word and she preferred them dressed. The television gave the living room its fake applause. A character told a joke. Nathan did not laugh. He said the house could not carry 3 adults if only 2 were pulling. He said everyone contributes. He repeated it the way he had at dinner. Somewhere inside that repetition was a child who learned early that a rule becomes truer the more often you say it. I listened to my son enforce a sentence he needed to believe, and the need inside it rang louder than the words. Amanda lowered her voice to a narrow thread. She asked if he had looked into places. Places was the word she used so she would not have to say the one that made people flinch. Nathan exhaled. It sounded like a chair giving up. He said he had typed facilities near me and then shut the laptop because the photos made him feel like a thief. Amanda told him that guilt is normal at first. Then she reminded him of the week I forgot to lock the back door. She brought up the time I misplaced the truck keys in the freezer. Both were months ago. Both had explanations. Neither mattered now that they had been promoted to evidence. She said the words memory care and wait list and deposit. The mug touched the table with a rounded sound. She had finished stirring. Her plan did not require more sweetness. I lay still. The plan took shape in their whispers like a building drawn with a fine pen line after line until you suddenly recognize a room you do not want to enter. Nathan said he could not do it to me, not yet. Amanda said we were not doing it to him. We were doing it for the household, for stability, for safety. She said the phrase, "It will be better this way," a sentence people use when the math does not add up, but they need the answer to stay. She said we would start with the retirement fund, that we would route it, that we would handle the bills. If he resisted, we would get help. She used the word counselor again. Then she used a quieter word, petition. She did not linger on it. She let it sit like a folded paper on a desk no one wanted to clean. I could hear Nathan pacing because old floorboards have long memories and they declare each step in their own language. He said I am not heartless. He said he just wanted to keep the house. He said the mortgage had a timer ticking I could not understand. Amanda said this is what adults do when life changes. Adults reassign resources. Adults protect assets. Adults make decisions and stop apologizing for them. She had the rare gift of making selfishness sound like stewardship. The sitcom ended. News took its place, voices more serious. The music at the top of the hour named after urgency. Nathan stopped pacing. The next words came slower like feet on unfamiliar ground. He said, fine. He said we would start with the paperwork and a schedule. He would find a moment when I was calm and mention how helpful it would be if we consolidated accounts for transparency. Amanda said she would bring home a folder. She would label it household and put my name under it so the illusion of ownership remained intact. She added a second track in the same breath. She would call about that place on Maple Ridge just to get information. It did not hurt to know the numbers. She said deposit again softer. In every marriage there is a moment when the two people turn and choose a voice they will use together. I listened to the voice my son and his wife built on the far side of a wall and recognized that they believed it was the sound of responsibility. Perhaps it was. Responsibility without memory is just accountancy without context. I let my breath move slowly so the mattress would not complain. I thought about the many times I had whispered in these rooms too. Plans for a new roof. Plans to replace the washer before it dies. Plans to surprise Nathan with a trip when he finished high school and pretended he did not care. The wall has heard love, fear, panic, and relief. Tonight, it heard a different tone. Nothing was shouted. No plates broke. That is what made it cold. Amanda said she would speak to someone at Harris and get the exact steps. She said there were ways to structure things so that elders did not squander resources. She said we could be guardians in practice without going through a judge. She said the phrase representative payee and let it drift as if it had arrived by itself. The spoon rested beside the mug. I did not need to see it to know where it was. I could hear the silence it left. Nathan asked, "What if he refuses?" Amanda said, "Then we set boundaries. We put a date on the calendar. We say 1 week to contribute or he moves. We say we love you enough to be clear. We say this is not punishment, it is logistics." She said the word logistics the way a general unfolds a map. Dead weight, retirement fund, deposit, petition, boundaries. The words lined up like a column I would reconcile later. The television dropped to a low hum. Some commercials whispered about relief from a pain it could not cure. Nathan sighed. He said he hated this. Amanda told him to drink his tea before it cooled. He said he wished his mother were here to tell him what to do. Amanda did not answer for a heartbeat. When she did, her voice softened. She said she wished that too. But here we are. Then she said a thing that told me the plan had not been born tonight. She said, "We have talked about this for months." The sentence arrived quietly and sat on the rug like a secret that had learned to stretch. I let that truth slide into its place. My mind did not reach for defense or anger. It reached for my notebook, but I have not moved yet. I listened for the end. I wanted to know the shape of their silence. Nathan said he would speak to me in the morning. He would keep his voice level. He would present it as an invitation to do the right thing. Amanda said, "Good. Do not ask. Tell." She returned the spoon to the cup one last time. It made a dull note against the ceramic like a gavel made of tin. Footsteps crossed the room. A switch clicked. The television gave a final chirp and went dark. The rectangle under my door collapsed into shadow. I sat up slowly and let my feet find the floor. The boards remembered me too. I stood and waited until the house's breath told me it was safe to move. Then I turned on the lamp. The light was small enough not to spill into the hallway. I opened the drawer of the nightstand and took out the cheap spiral and the pen I trust. On a clean page I wrote what I had heard, not the feeling of it, but the words. Retirement fund, root deposit, Maple Ridge information call, forms for consolidation, representative payee, 1 week, boundaries, if it refuses then petition. I wrote Amanda initiated not because I needed blame, but because accuracy matters when you are mapping a storm. The pen felt good in my hand. Familiar. Honest. I added a line at the bottom not to punish myself with hope, but to remind myself what is true. People who whisper plans in the dark believe they are protecting the daylight. The wall disagrees. It remembers everything. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. I clicked the pen shut. The little sound was nothing to the house and everything to me. I turned off the lamp and let the room return to its proper size. Nothing is colder than a plot spoken in voices you love. The cold passed through me and kept going. I lay down and let the quiet settle again. Somewhere outside, the wind practiced opening the morning. Inside, the wall went on being itself thin and faithful to its job. I agreed to work, not because I needed money, but because I needed proof. Morning came in quietly, the kind of light that does not insist. It just reveals what is already there. I heard Amanda moving in the kitchen before I entered, measured footsteps, a drawer sliding, the soft thud of a cabinet closing. When I stepped in, the kettle had already done its job. Steam rose in a patient ribbon. The mug waited like a small ceremony. I wrapped my hands around it and felt a tremble I did not bother to hide. Heat rose and touched the corners of my eyes. It could have been the steam. It could have been something older. Nathan came in with his phone in his palm as if the day would not begin until the screen told him it could. He said we should go over expectations so nothing gets lost. He said it would be easier on everyone if we treated this like any other job. He said there are standards and routines and performance measures, words he had learned somewhere that sold checklists. I let him line the sentences up in a row. Then I told him I understood. I would start on Monday. I would be on time. I would say yes to simple tasks, and I would not invent complications. He nodded like an instructor pleased to hear a student repeat the rule. He said it is called responsibility. I looked at him, the boy who had once gripped my hand so hard at the county fair because the crowd felt like a tide, and I said so in gratitude. The words settled on the tablecloth and did not move. He did not pick them up. He reached for a pen and tapped it twice against a folded piece of mail. Amanda placed a thin folder on the counter with a little blue tab that read, "Household" in tidy block letters. She said she would keep receipts there so we could all see where things stood. She said it would make sense for me to bring home any pay stubs and put them under the first clip. That way everything stayed transparent. She used that word the way storefronts use glass to reassure you that there is nothing to hide. I lifted the mug and took a careful sip. The cup shook a little against my fingers. I did not force my hand to be still. After a lifetime of control, letting a tremor be a tremor can feel like strength. The heat rose again, skimming my eyes. Outside, the first truck of the morning growled down the block, a simple engine announcing that someone had gotten up to do what they always do. Nathan described the schedule he imagined for me. He said he would drive me the first day to make sure access badges and directions were handled smoothly. He said he would check in at lunch, a quick call to confirm how things were settling. He said if facilities needed anything extra from me, he would help interpret. He liked that word. It made him feel like the bridge no one else could build. I nodded slowly and set the mug down. A little coffee crept over the rim and walked a short path along the saucer. It left a half moon that would dry into a brown memory if no one wiped it. I asked who his boss was again. His answer came automatically. He said his direct supervisor was a man named Carter, who handled operations for the West Wing, and that at the top of everything was Mr. Eastwell. He added that I did not need to worry about names. He would handle the introductions. I told him, of course. It was a simple question, and I had received exactly the answer I needed. He did not notice the way I tucked it away. Amanda slid a list toward me. She had written simple items in a neat column: pack a lunch, wear sturdy shoes, bring a light jacket. She said there is nothing wrong with looking presentable even in a humble post. She said people judge based on first glance. She said appearances matter. I thanked her. She smiled in that calm way she had when she knew she had done something a teacher might praise. We lived in a world where gold stars still mattered if you could not see them. The mug warmed my palms again. The steam climbed and blurred the edge of the world for a second and then let it snap back. I thought about the files I had kept for years at work, all those binders with little flags tabs in yellow or red for urgency. An organization can be a comfort or a weapon, often both. I took another sip and let the taste anchor me in the present. The present is where proof lives. Nathan said he had already emailed Carter to expect a new hire. He said he had mentioned my name. He said he had taken care of it. Taking care of it made him taller. I watched him breathe into that posture. Amanda checked the time and said she had to leave early. She had a morning meeting and needed the printer before the others arrived. She reminded Nathan to bring home paper towels and the inexpensive shampoo he used without thinking. Then she turned to me and asked if I needed anything. The question wore a good face. I told her I had everything I needed for today. She grabbed her keys and pressed them into her purse with that final little push people use when they want the bag to behave. Nathan told her he would text. The front door opened, closed. The house inhaled. The kettle clicked as it cooled. The lines in the day moved slightly and settled. Nathan leaned his hip against the counter and watched me as if I might reveal a trap. I held his gaze without challenge. He asked if I really did not mind. I told him mind is the wrong word for this. We were solving a problem with the tools we had. He said he hoped I understood the pressure he was under. He said interest rates do not negotiate. He said the mortgage had turned into a clock. I told him I understood more than he thought. He said he did not mean to offend me with last night's bluntness. He said he wanted the house to stand. I told him I had always wanted that too. A house should survive the people who borrowed it. He ran a hand over his jaw, then looked toward the hall as if Amanda might reappear and tell him he had said the right thing. He straightened and softened his tone, almost a rehearsal of kindness. He said he was glad I was willing to work. He said it proves we can get through this as a team. I lifted the mug again and felt the faint tremor start up and then settle like a bird choosing not to fly. I said, we will get through it. What I did not say was that teams are only teams when everyone recognizes the same captain. I cleared my place and rinsed the cup. The water turned hot and then hotter, and the steam made a new halo on the window. Nathan picked up the folder and thumbed the blue tab. He said he would put it on the side table near the mail. He said receipts go there. He said we could track everything. I told him I would remember. He laughed without humor. He said that would be a change. Then he caught himself and said sorry before the word could stain. I did not correct him. I dried the mug and set it upside down on the rack. The drip made a small patter, a sound you can miss if your life is too loud. Back in my room with the door open just enough to keep the air honest, I lay out what I would wear. Old boots polished until they looked like they still had something to prove. Work pants that had seen better years and did not complain about the ones they were given. A plain shirt, a jacket with a zipper that requires patience. I folded each piece the way muscle memory tells the body to behave when it wants to be steady. I did not smile. I observed. A man preparing to be underestimated does not need expressions. He needs accuracy. I took the notebook from the drawer and sat by the window where the light was honest. I wrote down the timeline Nathan had built for us. Monday starts. 7 sharp. Ride with Nathan. Lunch call. Receipts into the household folder. I added a second column in a hand so small it would look like a shadow to anyone else. Observe access procedures. Identify entry points. Learn names. Listen to who makes decisions. Ask no questions that reveal more than they answer. The plan did not need a name. The plan needed breathing room. A neighbor's dog trotted past and looked up at my window as if he had been sent to confirm I was still here. The maple gave one rustle, leaves answering some command the air had made. I could hear the house settling with its old comfort sounds, wood, remembering it had been trees before it learned to be shelter. I closed the notebook and rested my palm on its cover. Proof always begins with paying attention. Nathan called from the hallway, said he was heading out. He said he would bring takeout for dinner if Amanda texted a yes. He said he would send me the address for Monday in case I wanted to look it up and familiarize myself. I told him he could write it down and leave it on the counter. Then I asked once more in a tone so casual it barely counted as a question who his boss was again. He answered the same way he had before. Carter is in operations. Mr. Eastwell is at the top. He asked why. I told him I prefer to know the shape of the building before I walk in. He shrugged and told me not to overthink it. He said just show up and work. He said it twice without noticing. After he left the house, paused as if to listen for what was next. I stood in the kitchen again and looked at the blue tab on the folder. The word household sat there, polite and domestic. It did not say inventory. It did not say control. It did not say mine. I placed a blank envelope under the clip and left it open as if I had already begun to comply. Then I took my cooled mug and rinsed it once more for no reason except the sound of water made the room feel cleaner. Steam rose and met the early light that had finally decided to cross the floor. The two blurred for a second and then became the same thing. That was my cue. I let the moment pass through me and took a breath that belonged to no one else. Feigned submission is not surrender. It is the highest form of control a quiet man can practice, the kind that turns a day into a ledger and a ledger into an answer. When he called, his voice trembled. Not from care, but from fear. The phone had been ringing long enough to stretch the morning thin. I let it fill the room with that old, stubborn sound, each tone pulling a line across the quiet until I decided it had done its work. Then I answered and said hello as if I did not know who it was. "Where are you?" Nathan did not wait for breath. "Security never saw you. Carter is standing in the corridor asking me why I promised a body that never arrived. Do you understand what this looks like?" I turned my head and studied the square of light on the floor that the window throws at this time of day. I said I must have misread. I thought we said tomorrow. Or 8. I might have confused the time. Tomorrow. 8. He grabbed at the words as if one of them might rewind the hour. No, we said today. 7. We said it all week. Did you write it down? I told you to write it down. I did write it down. I looked at the notebook on the table and did not open it. I said perhaps I misplaced the note. I am sorry for the inconvenience. He had no room left for courtesy. Inconvenience. Carter just asked me in front of his staff why I was personally vouching for a new hire who cannot manage a simple start time. He asked if I understood that this is a workplace and not a home project. He asked if I also planned to file your timesheets. Everyone heard him. He was not wrong. And do you know what I said? I said, give him grace. He is new. He is my father. He will be reliable. Then my phone buzzed with the front desk saying, no one by your name has picked up a badge. Do you see the position I am in? The ceiling fan hummed at its slowest setting. I watched one blade pass the same point over and over and found it easy to believe that this is how embarrassment works. I told him again that I was sorry. I asked if coming in this afternoon would help. This afternoon helps no one. Carter is already moving the team forward. He had a tour planned. He had a sign-off ready. Now it is a waste. Nathan's breath tightened. This is not just about you not showing. It is about me. It is about my judgment. He lowered his voice to that sharp whisper that always made him feel in control. You made me look like a fool. Maybe you just needed a mirror. There was a pause. The pause grew bones. Then he said, do not play with me. Not today. My job is on the line. I told him I understood. He said the word boundaries like he was reading it from the cover of a book. Then he said, we are going to fix it. Tomorrow you will be at Eastwell at 7:45. I am driving you. There will be no confusion, no mistakes. If you do anything like this again, there will be consequences for both of us, and I swear I will not hesitate. I said, very well. He exhaled as if the room had grown bigger around him. He asked me to repeat the time. I did. He made me say it twice. Then he said, do not make me regret defending you. He hung up. The small click sent the rest of the house back into silence. I set the phone down and listened to the quiet as if it had an opinion. A delivery truck shuddered down the street. The neighbor's dog announced nothing in particular and felt proud of it. The square of light on the floor crept an inch. The phone began ringing again. It did not hurry. It rang the way an old alarm insists that morning is a promise. I let it go on until patience had said everything it could say. Then I picked up. Amanda. Her voice looked for a middle ground between concern and accusation and failed to land on either. What happened? Nathan just called me. He is a wreck. Carter tore into him. He said you never showed. Are you all right? Is there some kind of emergency? I told her I was fine. I said I must have written the time wrong. She let silence stretch a little too far and then filled it with little suggestions that wore the clothes of care. You should set reminders. You should ask for written instructions. You should understand that people are counting on you. Today created a ripple. She used the word ripple like a warning buoy. I told her I would be ready tomorrow. She breathed out in relief. She wanted me to hear. Good. Do not make this harder than it is. She paused and added, Nathan said Carter asked why he was hiring family. That is a bad look. It needs to be cleaned up. She ended the call with a bright little take care that sounded like pennies falling into a jar. I walked to the window and looked at the maple. The leaves did not care about schedules. They kept their own. A boy on a bike coasted down the block and threw a paper that hit the porch across the street with a slap. The day was ordinary except for the parts that were not. I opened the notebook and wrote exactly what had happened. Not because I needed proof for anyone else, because the mind edits to protect itself, and I prefer ink. I listed the time of Nathan's call, the phrases he used. Personal vouch. This is a workplace. Reliable. I wrote the number for Carter's extension from the email I had seen on the corner of the kitchen table. I did not call him, not yet. The phone dragged the quiet across the room again. Long rings. No hurry. I let it go to the last possible tone, and then I answered hello. A woman with a crisp voice introduced herself as someone from facilities. She wanted to know if I needed directions for my first day. She said she had a simple map. She said she would be happy to help. I thanked her and told her I had spoken with my son and that tomorrow would be best. She made a sound a little like a pencil being lifted. Tomorrow, then. She asked if I preferred the early slot or something later. Early is fine, I said. Thank you for reaching out. She told me to have a good day, and as she said it, I could hear the soft hum of an office that had no idea what story it was part of. When the call ended, the phone sat in my hand like a small tool that had completed its first job and was ready for the next. I placed it face down. The plastic sounded like a lid closing on a jar. I went to the sink and ran a little water. I watched the stream catch light and become a thin silver rope. There is a kind of patience that is not passive. It is the patience of a man who understands that a structure is strong until a single misaligned piece makes the whole floor complain. Text messages landed one by one. Nathan again. A clipped I will call later. Amanda with a reminder about being ready early. Then a short one that read, please do not make him pay for your pride. I put the phone back down and walked to the bedroom. Bootlaces lay coiled at the foot of the bed where I had left them. I picked them up and set them on the dresser so they would not be mistaken for something I had forgotten to tie. By mid-morning, I could hear the house breathing again the way it does when no one is home to crowd it. I used the time to straighten the drawer that always got trapped. I sanded the rough edge. It opened without complaint. Small success can carry a day if you let it. I wrote a second set of notes. Tomorrow's composition. Stand near Nathan and listen more than speak. Learn Carter's cadence. Listen for the name he mentions when he wants things to move. Do not solve anything yet. Let the room show you what it believes. The phone began its long arpeggio. I picked up at the fourth ring. Nathan did not say hello. He went straight to the damage report. Carter kept me after the round. He asked me to explain why I am hiring someone who cannot keep an appointment. He wanted to know if I was bringing the neighborhood into the building. He said this is not a charity. He used that word in front of his team and then looked at me long enough for everyone to memorize how that looks. My inbox is afire. I will be spending the rest of the day explaining you to people who do not want you explained. He waited as if he expected me to apologize in a way that could be submitted as a form. I told him I would be ready tomorrow at 7:45. He tried to slow down enough to make the future obey. He said he would be at my door at 7. He said he would hand me a badge himself. He said he would walk me through. He said he would not let me disappear. I told him that it would not be necessary. He did not hear me. He pushed one more demand across the line. Say it back to me. I said it back. He made me say it again. When he finished, he asked if I understood that actions have consequences. I told him I had learned that early. He pressed. Then why did you do this? I looked at the stopped clock on my dresser and decided to answer with the truth I was willing to put on a shelf. I said I thought we agreed on tomorrow. He groaned, the sound of metal refusing to bend. He asked what I had been doing all morning that was more important than showing up. I told him I had been here, waiting. He said, you cannot keep doing this. I said I had done it once. He told me he had to get back to work. He said he would talk to me this evening. The conversation had burned all the oxygen he had brought. He paused at the threshold of hanging up and said one last thing softer than he meant to. Please, Dad, do not make me the joke in that corridor. Then he left. The click had more weight to it this time. It turned the quiet into a wall you could lean against. I put the phone down and listened to the silence. There is teaching that arrives through lectures, and there is teaching that arrives through gravity. I had no interest in delivering speeches. Gravity would do. Let a man defend a promise that was never kept. Let him feel how thin a tone of authority becomes when it faces a room where no one owes him mercy. Let him explain family to a workplace that measures everything in minutes and margins. Sometimes the only way to help is to step back until the ground finds him. In the late afternoon, my doorframe collected a line of sunlight so narrow it looked like a thread pulled from a suit. I watched it slacken and fall. The phone stayed still. The house said nothing. The day had done what it needed. Tomorrow would do what tomorrow always does. It would bring people together in a building and let them reveal who they were when the elevator opened. I rested my hand on the notebook without opening it. The page would keep. The lesson had already begun. I spent 40 years finding numbers that did not add up. Hers were the easiest. It began the way mistakes like to begin, with confidence and paper. Amanda had a habit of leaving work documents where the house could see them, a folder on the console in the hallway, a stack of receipts beneath the mail as if paper could hide behind paper. I was not hunting. I was cleaning the surface with a damp cloth when the corner of a vendor invoice curled up and met my palm. Harbor Office Supply. Total due $238.41. I would have set it back down, but the figure did the small thing that makes an old accountant look twice. 238.41 is the kind of number that knows its place. It sits right. It does not pretend to be round. A second sheet copied from an expense report carried a different total for the same invoice. 728.41. The vendor line matched. The date matched. The cents matched. Only the hundreds had grown a new digit. I put both pages flat and let my mind do what it knows. A pattern is a shy animal. You do not chase it. You keep still until it steps closer. A maintenance ticket from a company called Cascadia Lift Services sat beneath them. $611 billed. Then a reimbursement form showing $1,611. The 10 had invited themselves to the party. There were 3 more. Small print, as neat as a new shirt, with totals that had developed a taste for zeros that were not on the original bill. If these were errors, they had an admirable sense of rhythm. The house held its breath while I cared about the paper. Nathan's car was not in the driveway. Amanda's planner lay open on a page with a morning meeting circle. The clock on the wall pretended not to notice me. I slid the documents into my desk drawer and closed it softly. Then I waited. There are kinds of waiting that change the temperature of a room. This one cooled it a degree and made time feel heavy. That night, after dishes and small talk, and the weather reported itself again without being asked, I took the drawer's contents to my room and laid them out with the care one gives to fragile photographs. The desk lamp cast its blue-tinted light across the pages. It washed my hands and face on a color screen that I know how to make. I pulled the chair in and opened the laptop. Fingers found keys they had not needed in months. The blue light deepened and gave me the attention a good witness gives. I built a simple spreadsheet. No flourishes. 5 columns. Vendor, date, original invoice total, submitted expense total, delta, Harbor Office Supply, 238.41, 728.41, delta 500 even, Cascadia Lift, 611, 1,611, delta 1,000 even. Daylight shone through those numbers. Even deltas are rare birds in honest work. They appear in fraud like matching suitcases at an airport. I added a 5th entry and a 6th. Northline Consulting. A name that sounded respectable and managed to say nothing. Consulting for what? The company address was a mailbox suite. The contact number pointed to a prepaid phone that stopped ringing after the second tone and went to a generic greeting. The invoice total was $840. The company reimbursed $1,340. A neat $500 again. I wrote the deltas down and then applied a small formula to highlight matching differences. The spreadsheet glowed like a map under ultraviolet. It took very little to see where the path ran. This could have been sloppiness paired with a tired bookkeeper, but the repetition was too clean and the timing too consistent. The pattern ran across 6 months. It only touched categories with quick approval cycles. Supplies, repairs, minor consulting. Items that pass under the busy eyes of partners who want the right piles in the right mailboxes on the 1st and the 15th. The more I looked, the simpler it became. In my life, complexity is often a disguise for fear. Simplicity is what you find when someone is sure they are not being watched. I needed proof outside the house. I needed confirmation that did not rely on Amanda's desk or printer. I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on a name I had not said in years. Martin Alvarez. We lost touch after he left the municipal audit office for private work, and then private work left him retired with too many fishing rods and not enough lakes. I dialed and waited. When he picked up, his hello carried the sound of a man expecting a robo-call. "Martin, it's Thomas." Silence held for half a breath, and then he laughed in relief. "Thomas Gray," he said, and asked if I was finally calling to admit his golf swing advice had ruined me. I told him I had something the game could not fix. I kept my words measured. I told him I needed a comparison set from vendors he might know. I told him I suspected a discrete series of inflated reimbursements at a small accounting firm a family member worked for. I said the firm's name, and his tone changed from friendly to professional in a quarter second. He asked how deep I thought it ran. I told him what I had found in Amanda's stack without telling him where I had found it. He asked if I had copies. I said I did. I told him it was just a quiet favor between old accountants. The words felt like the bridge we used to stand on when we translated a story into figures. He said he had friends at Cascadia Lift and Harbor office. He said he could confirm legitimate totals and dates without revealing why he cared. He could get statements or emails that matched numbers against vendor records. He said, "Give me a day, maybe less." I sent him photographs with everything except the totals cropped out of the originals so I would not prejudice him. While he moved his part along, I kept working mine. I searched the state business registry for Northline Consulting. The registered agent was a corporate service that offers addresses to companies that have not decided if they exist. The filing date was 6 weeks before the first invoice. No employees listed, no website. An email domain purchased through a generic provider. When you have spent your life with numbers, you learn when to stop digging. Too much evidence looks like theater. Enough looks like the truth. Martin called while the blue light painted a second mask across my face. He said he had vendor statements from Harbor and Cascadia on his screen. Harbor's invoice on the 29th was indeed $238.41. No line item could plausibly grow by 500. Cascadia had billed $611 for a service call that replaced a control panel. Their company would never alter a total to include someone's new digit. He would forward the confirmations, and if I wanted his notes summarizing the calls, he would keep my name out. He asked if I wanted to push this inside the firm or outside. "Outside is cleaner," I said. He agreed. I organized the files like a small trial. One folder labeled originals, one labeled reimbursed, one called vendor confirmation. I built a timeline that showed when each legitimate invoice arrived at Harris and when the matching inflated reimbursement left. The pattern revealed something else. The reimbursements coincided with a series of personal transactions on a store rewards program I recognized from Amanda's keychain. There were dates where office supply inflation matched weekends when her new handbags began to appear understated and expensive in the way of things designed to whisper. I did not need that to prove anything. It made a clearer picture for someone who might. Before I compiled the last page, I sat back and let the blue light recede from my vision. I reminded myself of what I wanted. Not humiliation, correction. A line through a calculation followed by a clean rewrite. A company should be protected from a person who thinks she is smarter than math. A husband should be required to live with the consequences of the voice he chooses to believe. I checked every total again and touched each file as if it needed blessing. Then I named the packet something any desk could recognize without asking what it was about. Expense reconciliation variant set. The printer in the hallway woke like a machine remembering its task. Gear engaged gear. The first page slid out, then the second. The sound of paper moving through rollers is the sound of a process that does not require opinion. I let the stack grow fat enough to feel satisfying in the hand, and then clipped it with a black binder clip that could survive a fall. I did not need paper, but paper is how some people accept reality. I left the packet in my drawer anyway. I knew what 28 pages could do if they landed on the wrong kitchen counter. Back at the desk, I opened a new message and addressed it to the managing partner listed on the firm's website. The name was simple and carried a history I respected. I kept my body still and my sentences clean. I explained that I had reason to believe repeated discrepancies existed in certain reimbursed expenses over the past 6 months. I attached a sample set for immediate review. I suggested categories to audit without assuming authority. I included vendor confirmations in a separate attachment. I wrote that I expected no personal reply and that my interest was limited to the integrity of the firm's books. I did not sign with my full story. I did not need to. The attachments would do the speaking for anyone who needed. I hovered over the send button for only as long as it takes a scruple to show itself, and then sat down. The cursor blinked. The blue light drew a fine outline around my hands. I pressed send. The message left the screen in a smooth movement like a good answer leaving the chalkboard. Afterward, the room returned to its ordinary color. The printer cooled. The house learned nothing new and said nothing about it. I closed the laptop and sat in quiet. In my ears, the last whir of the printer faded, and the world made room for the faint sound of a neighbor's wind chimes practicing a song they would not finish. I felt no triumph. The only relief was that the work had been done in the manner I know how to trust. Justice does not need to raise its voice. It needs accurate data and a place to go. The walls that once echoed laughter now echoed panic. It started with the front door hitting the jamb harder than it should. Amanda came in without ceremony, hair let loose by a hand that had been pulling at it, blazer folded over her arm like an apology she could not finish. She did not look at me. She went straight to the counter, opened a drawer, then closed it as if she had forgotten what a drawer is for. The television remote was on the coffee table, mute and obedient. She picked it up, set it down, and finally turned to me as if she had to find a human face to make the moment real. They suspended me. The words landed without decoration. Immediate review. External audit. They said the materials were detailed. They said dates and vendor confirmations were attached. I had to hand over my card, my laptop, my badge. She pressed her lips together and swallowed. They are bringing in people tomorrow. They want the last 12 months. There are days when comfort lives in silence. I kept the room gentle. I set the paper down folded as if it were someone else's mail and nodded once to show I had heard everything. Who would do this? She asked finally. It was not a question I needed to answer. She moved to the kitchen and reached for a wine glass. It met the counter at the wrong angle. It tilted, then slipped. The stem failed its one job. The bowl hit the tile and became a scatter of bright pieces. The sound was crisp, a verdict in clear glass. She stared at the shards as if they had arrived with a message. I was careful, she whispered. I made sure every number matched a category. She caught herself and looked back at me as if confessing to the wrong priest. I mean, the books are complex. They know that. Everyone knows that. Things happen. Sit, I said, and I made it sound as if the word could hold weight. She sat hands flat on her knees, the skin over her knuckles drawn tight. Her breath traveled in short lines. In the other room, the refrigerator motor started and kept a steady hum, the one faithful machine telling the house it still had a job. Her phone rang. She let it vibrate against the table and then answered. She did not use a speaker. The conversation came to me in fragments. Yes, I understand. They have what? Vendor statements. Tomorrow at 9. I will be there. She ended the call with a soft, all right that meant nothing was all right. A second call. This time she looked at the screen and put it down without answering. Nathan. The phone insisted. She answered on the fourth ring. I am home. A pause. Yes. Suspended. Another pause longer. They had everything. The pause became a whole. No. I do not know who. Stop asking me who. She did not put the phone on speaker, but his voice traveled anyway. It had the tone men use when they address a fire they think can be ordered out of the room. I said stop, she repeated, and ended the call with a single press like a door slammed carefully instead of hard. She lifted her eyes to mine. In them, a calculation. If I lose my job, we lose health insurance, she said. Do you understand what that does to this house? I let the sentence pass over me and settle somewhere it could not bruise. Breathe, I said. Let the dust fall before you start sweeping it. She laughed once without humor. You sound like a pamphlet. Then, almost pleading, Thomas say something useful. You will have time to rest now, I said softly. At least that. The line hung between us, the mirror image of another morning when she told me that people my age should stay busy with small work so we do not become problems. Rest had been a kindness, then offered like a dog treat to an obedient animal. Today it echoed like a bell that remembers where it was first struck. She blinked and looked away. Do not do that, she said. Do not talk like this is poetry. She stood and began to gather the glass with a dish towel, slow and deliberate, one hand under the other. The towel found a sliver. Blood beaded on a fingertip. She did not notice at first. When she did, she made a small sound and put the towel down. She went to the sink and turned the water on. The blood drew a red thread and then dissolved. The door opened again this time, with Nathan's breath arriving before his body. He came in with his tie-loosened jacket over his shoulder posture, at war with itself. He looked at Amanda, then at me, then at the floor where the towel had been. He saw the glass in the trash and the open drawer, and his face changed shape. He crossed the room with the urgency of a man whose role has been written for him mid-scene. What happened, he asked, and the question was not for information. Amanda said the word again. Suspended. He shut his eyes like someone bracing for a wave. On what basis documents, she said. Records. Vendor confirmations. He turned to me because the room made him. What did you do? Nothing you did not teach me. He pulled back a half step as if the floor had lifted. Do not be clever. Not now. First you make me a joke in a hallway. Now this." His voice broke. "I spent the entire day explaining you to people who do not want you explained. And I come home to this." Amanda cut in. "We need a plan, not blame." Then she turned to me and her voice found a thread of accusation, even as it asked for help. "Thomas, if you know anything, say it. I know that numbers tell stories," I said, "and those stories get checked when they are written in other people's money." Nathan's hands opened and closed. "Speak straight." "I am speaking straight," I said. "You wanted responsibility. You spoke of boundaries. You demanded contributions. I am contributing exactly what I know." He moved closer, then stopped himself. He saw the towel and the faint red on Amanda's finger. He took her hand and rinsed it again, though there was nothing left to rinse. His grip softened. "We are not losing this house," he said to her. "I will not allow it." He glanced at me as if I were an uncooperative ledger. "Do you understand what you set in motion?" "I understand momentum," I said. "It is not always clear who starts a thing. It is always clear who cannot stop it." He looked around the room like a man searching for a lever and finding only furniture. He lowered his voice to a level he thought might restore control. "Tomorrow we go to Eastwell. No drama, no confusion. You will work. You will be seen working. I will fix Carter's opinion. One problem at a time." Amanda rubbed her thumb and forefinger together, as if she could erase the memory of glass. "And I will go to the firm at 9, she said to no one in particular. "I will sit in a room while men ask questions with answers already attached." There was a silence then, not empty but crowded with words that would not fit. The refrigerator hummed. The neighbor's lawn sprinkler clicked and spun a measured arc across a narrow strip of grass. On the television screen, a screensaver moved a small blue logo from corner to corner without purpose. Nathan finally said, "Dad, if you had anything to do with this, say it now. Say what I asked as if I could be taught the right response by tone alone. Say you sent something, say you made a call. Say you turned us into a lesson. I have nothing to confess," I said, and that was the truth I was willing to carry into this moment. "But I will tell you a thing you can use. The firm does not suspend without documentation. There is paper. It has dates. It has statements from vendors. It will not care what we call this. It will not be impressed by explanations that use words like messy or complex. It will keep being what it is. A record." Amanda's shoulders dropped in a way that had nothing to do with surrender. It was simply what bodies do when they are done pretending a posture can hold up a roof. She sat again. She looked at Nathan and then at the floor. "He is right," she said, and for a second there were 3 adults in the room. Nathan turned away, then back. His voice had become hoarse from fighting the day. "We will get through this," he said, but there was no muscle inside the sentence. He picked up the broken stem from the trash with 2 fingers as if delicacy could reverse anything. He threw it away a second time. "I have to go to the garage," he added, and left without waiting for agreement. The door to the garage closed with a firm seal. A few seconds later, something metallic shifted. A toolbox lid. A wrench was placed hard in a drawer. Amanda wiped the counter where the glass had been. The cloth moved in a slow circle, evidence of a woman who wanted to make at least this surface behave. She rinsed the cloth. She wrung it out and hung it on the sink's edge. "If they ask you questions," she said, and looked at me with a face I recognized from other people in other rooms who learned that intention and outcome are strangers, "what will you say?" "I will say that I am home," I answered. "I will say that I am starting a job tomorrow and that I will be on time." "That is not what I meant," she whispered. "I know," I said. She nodded as if the gesture had to exist so the evening could continue, then walked down the hall. The bedroom door shut without anger. The house exhaled. The electric hum of the refrigerator quieted, and then returned like a small tide that keeps its promise. I sat with the new quiet and let it arrange itself inside me. Rage is loud, and then it leaves a ringing. Panic rushes and then collapses. What remained was the sound of something that had cracked along the seams it had been hiding for years. You can live a long time inside a structure that looks sturdy. The first rain, the first real wind, and the truth shows you where the nails were missed. Night gathered itself without asking permission. I turned off the living room lamp and the dark held steady. In the distance, a car took the corner a little too fast, then slowed, engine settling into a patient idle. Another moved past tires, whispering over pavement, the sound of a morning not here yet announcing itself from a street away. The road was silent, but every mile screamed consequence. Nathan pulled up to the curb and let the engine idle as if the car could rehearse our morning for us. He did not honk. He did not text. He waited for me to appear like a supervisor waiting for a delivery. I stepped outside, and the air felt undecided, not cold, not warm, a day keeping its hand close. I opened the passenger door. The hinge made a low groan. Then the door closed with a thump that sounded like something made to keep people in rather than out. The sound settled between us and did not move. Seatbelts clicked. He kept both hands at the 10 and 2 he had learned at 16 and never surrendered. We rolled forward without hurry. The tires hummed the way they do when a car carries a story heavier than it wants. A turn signal ticked once, twice, then found its rhythm. The dashboard screen glowed with a polite map that did not know anything about us. The left lane opened and we slipped into it. The street began to pass in measured units. Houses that have done their job so long they forgot it is work. A bus stop with one man who stared at the sidewalk like it had offered him a choice. A scrap of newspaper was doing small loops near the curb because the morning breeze had nothing new to lift. Nathan cleared his throat and kept his eyes on the road. He said he would walk me in and stay until the badge was activated. He said Carter would meet us in the lobby at 7:50. He said we would treat this morning like a clean slate. He said those words the way a man talks to a mirror right before a difficult call. He added that we would not discuss yesterday. I said that was fine. Yesterday was already written. The heater fan whispered across the dashboard and faded. The silence felt padded like a room prepared for arguments that should not echo. Nathan reached to lower the volume on a radio that was already off. His hand returned to the wheel. We caught the light at the corner where the maples lean in August. The signal blinked red. He watched it as if it owed him an apology. The car behind us carried a woman in a blazer tapping her steering wheel with 2 fingers. The crosswalk sign changed. We moved. He glanced at me in the way people do when they hope your face can be an instruction manual. He said, "Do not embarrass me again." I looked out at the low buildings giving way to taller ones and said, "That is entirely up to you." The answer landed without spite. It was just the truth adjusting its cuffs. He pressed his lips together. He said, "We will be precise. You will listen to Carter. You will not try to solve things. You will follow the plan." He took a breath that he wanted to be steady and almost was. He said, "I cannot afford another scene." I let the new stretch of road speak for us for a while. The expansion joints met the tires with a soft thud every few seconds, a slow metronome reminding us that distances are made of small, repeated events. A truck pulled into our lane and then thought twice. Nathan let it correct without comment. We passed a row of small shops in metal strip buildings. A barber is sweeping. A bakery setting out trays of something sweet. A locksmith unlocking his own door because sometimes life insists on irony. The street widened and offered us a view of the overpass and the buildings beyond. I could feel inside my chest a sensation I have known for years and do not name. It is not confidence. It is not anticipation. It is the quiet knowledge that a line you drew days ago is about to meet the mark you chose for it. Nathan said he had spoken to HR about badges and forms. He said he had printed out a simple sheet for me to sign in case I needed reminders. He said he had listed our household as a contact point so he could be called if anything came up. I told him housekeeping was useful. He nodded as if to accept the credit on behalf of housekeeping. He told me the phrase "in case anything came up" meant he would not be surprised today. He needed to believe he could outrun surprise by planning enough. I let him keep that belief for 2 more miles. We took the outer loop around the small lake that pretends to be a park. There was a jogger in a reflective vest whose breathing had found that efficient rhythm all runners seek. A pair of geese stood where the grass gives up and the water begins next, stretched alert to a world that does not include buildings. The car's cabin was quiet enough that I could hear Nathan's breath and my own 2 clocks set to different times. He said if Carter asks about yesterday, let me answer. He said if anyone uses the word charity, ignore it. He said if anyone jokes about family hires, you do not take it personally. There was an edge inside the word family that caught slightly. I said I would let him lead the conversation. He took the permission as if I had signed something. The highway on-ramp lifted us into a steady flow of cars. The sound changed here. It became a deep, constant rush, a river of machines moving in one direction because someone painted lines that way. Nathan merged and set the cruise control, and we entered the part of the ride where people often make small talk to keep the larger talk away. He did not make small talk. He did ask one question that was not about timing or entry points. He asked if I was nervous. I told him no. He said maybe you should be. I said today everything will be clear. He gripped the wheel a moment harder, then released it. He asked what that meant. I told him clarity is just the truth without its coat on. He said I was being poetic again and reminded me that poetry does not help anyone find a supply closet. I smiled without teeth. There are kinds of help he cannot imagine. We exited near the industrial park where the streets have names that sound like future promises. Commerce, progress, evergreen, although there are very few trees. The buildings stood with their faces to the road glass cut into rectangles, metal and concrete from shoulder to toe. Nathan's shoulders lowered minutely as we reached familiar territory. He cracked his neck the way he does when he wants his body to know he is in charge of it. We hit a rough patch, and the glove box rattled. He reached to steady it, and then thought better of it. The light ahead stayed green long enough to feel like permission. We turned into the long lane that leads to Eastwell. I did not say the name. It said itself. The entry sign did not boast. It is simply stated, Eastwell Industries. The letters looked heavier than the stone they were attached to. A guard booth took attendance without wanting to be anyone's enemy. Nathan held up his badge. The guard glanced into the car and nodded. We passed into the wide internal roads where the landscaping has learned the company's schedule. Nathan's jaw tightened. He said, "Remember, I do the talking." I said, "Of course." He slowed as we approached the front circle. The glass front reflected a slice of street and a shape of sky in a way that made the building look both present and untouchable. More important to me was the sound. The tires hissed over fresh concrete. A delivery truck sighed at the loading bay and then stopped, air brakes releasing with a long, tired breath. Somewhere above us, a vent fan throbbed steadily, the building's own heartbeat, mechanical and unbothered by human scenes. He put the car in park. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he looked at me as if I were a key to a lock he had not read instructions for, and said, "This is where you do exactly as asked." I nodded. He reached across to the glove box and opened it to check for the paper he wanted me to carry. He found it and pressed it into my hand. It was unnecessary. He needed to feel that the day could be managed with handoffs. I did not take that away from him. We stepped out. The doors closed with twin thumps that matched a short echo against the stone that felt like a stamp. The engine ticked as it cooled. Shoes met pavement. The morning had gathered enough cars that the lot made its own music, a low swirl of rubber and brakes and occasional horns that touched the air and left. Nathan came around the front and walked half a step ahead. He kept a pace that would have been called brisk if anyone were timing it. I matched it easily. A man learns how to follow without falling behind. A group of employees moved toward the entrance carrying their coffees and their conversations. They spoke the dialect of deadlines. One laughed softly at something no one else heard. A security guard at the doors glanced up, scanned, and saw nothing worth alarm. Automatic doors parted and released the inside air cooler cleaner with that faint scent of floor polish and ozone that all large lobbies agree upon. Before we crossed the threshold, Nathan turned to me and spoke the day's last attempt at command. "Do not embarrass me again. I told him that it is entirely up to you." He looked at me harder than he had all morning. Something flickered behind his eyes, not fear, not yet, something more like the knowledge that a script can change even if you do not want it to. He pushed the door open the rest of the way and we stepped under the sensors. The revolving movement made a soft whoosh that swallowed our footfalls. Inside the lobby kept its voice low. The reception desk printer hummed in a steady line. Distant elevators chimed and opened to greet unseen people. A phone rang once and stopped. The call was handled before it became a demand. Nathan pointed toward a seating area and said, "Wait there for 2 minutes. He will be here." He meant Carter. He straightened his tie and pressed a palm down the front of his shirt to quiet a wrinkle that only he could see. He walked toward the security station, already preparing the version of me he intended to sell. I stood where he wanted and let the building talk. Air gathered in vents and chose its path. The polished floor clicked under a pair of heels. The badge reader near the turnstiles made a cheerful tone for someone who had permission to pass. On the far side of the glass, the city kept moving, just a muted rush beyond the lobby's measured sounds. The car we arrived in sat where he left it, a small machine cooling in the shade of large trees. I felt no need to rehearse what would come next. When a room like this breathes, it breathes in facts. My part did not require force. It required presence and the patience to let a mile's worth of consequence arrive at a pair of doors already opening. My son introduced me as the janitor. His boss called me a partner. It happened in the corridor that runs like a spine through Eastwell glass on one side, cold stone on the other. Everything designed to make footsteps sound like decisions. Carter arrived first with his clipboard tucked under his arm and the kind of smile a man wears when he is too busy to be unkind. Nathan stepped in front of me as if he could shape the view. "This is my father," he said. "He is here for the facilities position. We will need a badge." Carter nodded without looking hard. He said, "Welcome," and reached for the temporary form. He started to write my name. The marble floor took everyone's weight and pushed it back with a clean echo. A group of analysts bumped past in a hurry that felt practiced. A printer chirped somewhere behind the glass wall. Elevator doors opened and closed with a polite chime. Nathan kept his voice low. He said, "We will keep this simple. No confusion, no scenes. Let me speak for you." He put a hand on my sleeve as if I were a suitcase someone could lose. Carter asked me to confirm the spelling of my last name. "Gray," I said. He wrote it slowly and tore the paper with a neat rip. He motioned toward the turnstiles. "We will start with a day badge," he said. "Security can handle the photo downstairs later." Nathan started to say, "Perfect." Then the corridor changed its mind. Robert Eastwell walked toward us with two assistants in a loose V, reading from a sheaf of notes as he moved. He had the pace of a man who trusts himself to arrive on time without looking at his watch. I felt the same small recognition in my chest I had felt in a garage a lifetime ago when a plan found its owner. He looked up once, scanning the morning. His eyes hit Carter, then Nathan, then me. He stopped walking. The assistants sensed the pause and did what good assistants do. They became quiet furniture. Carter straightened. "Good morning, Mr. Eastwell. I have the West Wing updates for you." Robert nodded but did not shift his gaze. Nathan took a half step forward and found his manager's voice. "Mr. Eastwell, sir, this is my father. He is starting with facilities. I am helping him on board." Robert's expression did not move, yet the temperature around us did. He spoke my name. "Thomas, my friend." The words were simple, and they cleared the space the way the weather clears. Nathan's mouth opened and closed. He recalibrated without grace. He said, "You know each other." Robert looked at my son as if he were being introduced to an unfamiliar tool in his own workshop. "Know each other," he repeated. Then to Nathan, in a tone that did not rise and did not need to, he asked, "What exactly are you doing?" Nathan looked at Carter as if paperwork could shield him. "Just helping facilities with a hire, sir. Family. Keeping things efficient." Robert took one small step forward. The marble returned to the step like a gavel striking once. "You brought the man who owns your paycheck to mop floors." The sentence did not ask permission to land. It landed. There was a hush, the kind that passes through a space and leaves a mark. Carter's clipboard lowered an inch. A woman from compliance who had been walking past stopped without meaning to. Two interns disappeared behind a column and forgot to keep moving. The word partner crossed Robert's face without needing to be spoken. He turned to me and his voice softened in the way a man makes room for a long road. "Thomas," he said, "is this some experiment in humility I was not told about?" I said, "People reveal themselves when they think no one's watching." My tone carried nothing extra. It did not need to. Nathan's face shifted through colors you do not see on purpose. He tried to build a bridge with speed. "Sir, I did not know. I only meant to ensure he was contributing to the house. We have boundaries. We thought a small position would be appropriate." Robert looked past him toward the glass and the reflection of all of us standing there in our roles. He said to Carter, "Would you give us a minute?" Carter stepped back. He did not leave. He did not need to hear to understand. Robert addressed the corridor without raising his voice, and the corridor heard him anyway. 25 years ago, he said this man believed in a company that did not exist yet. He believed in it with something better than enthusiasm. He believed that with money he did not wave in anyone's face. He wrote checks when checks were courageous. He sat with me through models that broke and plans that learned to stand. He signed on as a founding investor. He still holds 35% of the company whose badge you are trying to place on his shirt. There is a sound a building makes when many people understand something at once. It is not a gasp. It is not a murmur. It is a quiet that firms up. That quiet filled the hall. A single shoe tapped marble, then didn't. A receptionist at the far desk set down her pen with care. Nathan managed one sentence and chose the wrong one. 35, as if the number were a personal affront. Robert turned back to him. 35, he said again, and let the number do its own work. And never once did he ask for an office with a window. He did not ask for his name on a wall. He asked for the books to be honest and the people to be paid. Carter's eyes flicked between us. He had the look of a man trying to decide which page of the manual covered days like this. Nathan tried again. I was only solving a problem at home, if I had known. He did not finish because knowledge is not the only measure. Robert's voice took on that even edge leaders keep for days that bend their faith. You humiliated a parent in your own house. Then you arranged to humiliate him in mine. You used your position to push a man you did not understand into a role you chose for him. You misrepresented a hire to your supervisor. You attempted to leverage company resources to handle what you called boundaries. He exhaled through his nose in a way that erased any performance. This is not about a janitor job. This is about judgment. Nathan stepped forward as if proximity could slow the outcome. Sir, please, I can correct this. We do not need to escalate. He looked around at the listeners who had gathered by accident and by instinct. A surge of something like shame crossed his face and then fell away. He glanced at me, searching for the father he remembered and not finding him. Robert shook his head once. Nathan, he said with a finality that did not shout, I cannot trust you in my corridors. Your employment is terminated effective now. Security will help you collect your things. He turned to Carter. Make sure the team understands this is a question of integrity, not lineage. He returned to me. I am sorry to do this in public, Thomas, but some lessons insist on public rooms. Nathan took a breath that wanted to become an argument and then broke into pieces. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the small boy who once pressed a green stamp too hard and inked the blotter and waited for permission to breathe. Now there was no stamp to fix and no father who could shrug away gravity. He tried one more sentence. Dad. But the word did not hold up. It had too much history on it to balance. I answered by standing straight. There are moments when mercy leaves the truth intact. I did not step toward him. I did not speak his name. I let the corridor do what corridors do. It carried consequences forward on the sound of shoes. Security approached without hurry. They spoke to Nathan with the exact level of respect owed to a person whose day has changed because a door closed. He handed over his badge with fingers that did not trust themselves. He worked his mouth into thank you, and no one required him to finish the phrase. He glanced at Carter, who did not look away. He glanced at Robert and found no appeal. He glanced at me and found a man who had finished grading an exam years ago. Robert touched my shoulder, a gesture as light as a check mark on a clean column. If you want to use my office, he said, we can sit. Or we can walk. The building belongs to you as much as me. I told him walking would be fine. He nodded, and the assistants fell into step the way they had earlier when the morning still thought it could predict us. We moved down the marble hall. The sound of our soles met the stone and returned like a steady verdict. People stepped aside, not out of fear, but because clarity makes room for itself. As we passed the turnstiles, a young man from compliance who had stopped earlier put his eyes back on his screen and pretended to type. He would remember how the light hit the glass. He would remember the single use of the word that marks days like this. He would tell someone later that it was a shock to learn what the company was built on, and it would be the only time that word deserved the air. At the lobby doors, Robert paused. He looked at me with something older than gratitude. I said, "Do not worry. I learned long ago to prefer the work over the credit." He said the work is why we stand here. He pushed the glass open with a palm, and the hinge gave a smooth whisper. Behind us, the corridor held its new alignment. In front of us, the morning had sharpened along the edges of the building. We stepped out, and the door eased itself closed. The soft seal of glass meeting frame marked the end of something that had been off balance for a long time. Out on the circle, the sprinklers stopped their quiet clicking, and the air held still for a beat that felt like a heartbeat agreeing with itself. Somewhere beyond the grounds, the sky lightened in a way that did not ask for applause. When truth enters a room, false crowns bow. I did not need to look back to know the corridor would remember. At sunrise, the coffee did not taste like loneliness anymore. Steam lifted and met the warm light that slipped across the counter. The first sip did what it always does when a morning belongs to itself. It steadied my hands without pretending to solve anything. The house breathed in its slow way, wood remembering how to hold quiet pipes, deciding not to complain. I wound the little clock on the dresser and listened as the spring caught and the hands began again. A gentle tick took the room back from silence. Nothing dramatic, just time agreeing to keep going. I stood at the window that faces the maple and let the day assemble. A pair of sparrows argued about nothing important, and won. A jogger passed Ponytail, moving to a pace that had been earned 1 mile at a time. Somewhere a screen door closed and then opened again, the sound of a family finding breakfast. I thought of yesterday without replaying it. Truth had spoken where it needed to speak. Everyone heard what their own lives made of it. There is no need to narrate what a corridor already remembers. A knuckle touched the front door and waited. 3 small knocks, no hurry. I set the mug down and walked the short distance through a hallway that had not yet learned to echo. Robert stood on the porch with his jacket folded over one arm and a look that men wear when they know a conversation is a gift, even if it arrives late. We shook hands the way old friends do when the hand knows the weight it will meet. He said he would not stay long. He said he wanted to see me at home rather than drag more rooms into what did not need an audience. I stepped aside and he came in. The door rested back against the frame and kept its voice down. In the kitchen, he glanced once at the stopped ring of an old watermark on the table, then at the clock that had started again. He sits like a man who respects chairs. He thanked me for the coffee and waited until the steam thinned before he spoke. Robert said that the company owed me more than a line in a book. He said the board needed what I had always given without asking for a nameplate. He said if I wished it, I could take a seat that would keep the books honest and the vision clean. He chose his words with care. He left room in them for both dignity and refusal. He has always known how to leave room. I looked at the window and let the leaf shadows move across the sink like quiet handwriting. I told him I was grateful. I told him that the work we started together had taught me to love results more than ceremonies. I said the sentence I had kept waiting in my pocket for the right light. This time I retire on my own terms. He did not argue. He let the meaning settle exactly where I put it. Then he smiled, small and real relief and respect mixing in a way that belongs to men who survive their own certainty. He said he would keep my chair empty until I told him otherwise. He said that knowing I was at a table even when I was not in the room would make the room better. He lifted his cup and took a slow drink and then set it down with the care of a person who remembers the worth of a surface. He stood and put a hand on my shoulder, which did not need to prove anything. He said the line people like to say after days like yesterday, "Justice has been served." I shook my head and answered what I believe is the only useful correction. No, Robert, it is just balance restored. He breathed out once through his nose and nodded like a man signing a document he wrote himself years ago. Then he walked with me to the door. On the porch, we did not rehearse the past. He told me to call when I wanted to fish or sit in a place where no one asks for conclusions. I told him I would. The door came forward on its hinge and met the jamb with a soft kiss. Out in the maple, the sparrows began again. Less argument now, more ordinary chatter. The sound pulled the morning loose from all the rooms that had tried to hold it. I did not go back to the kitchen right away. I walked through the house and let my hand find the things that had done their jobs without applause. The dresser drawer that no longer stuck because I sanded it. The picture frames that had never asked for better glass. The narrow hallway where that one floorboard says hello when a foot finds it. I stopped in the room where I keep the notebook and rested my palm on the cover without opening it. The paper had done its duty. Data had traveled where it needed to go. There was nothing left to list. Some pages closed themselves. Nathan was not home. Amanda was not home. The house had a space where their voices used to sit. I did not check my phone. I did not need to know what new sentences they were struggling to finish. Consequences have their own calendar. People arrive at understanding on a schedule that seldom asks my opinion. I poured a little more coffee and watched the steam curl and thin. When I lifted the cup, it did not feel like a shield. It felt like a cup. I stepped onto the small stoop out back and stood with the sun on my forearms. The maple gave a narrow shade that moved when the light moved. I could hear a dog 2 streets over finding a new reason to announce himself. The air had that clean sound that only appears when the day has not been asked to carry too much yet. A neighbor nodded over the fence. "We have never traded names. We do not need to." He lifted a hose and began watering a rectangle of dirt that insists on being green. I listened to the faint hiss and thought about a summer when my wife laughed at the way I pretended the lawn cared what I wanted. Inside, the clock ticked with a confidence it had not earned and did not need to. I turned and watched it through the doorway, the brass hands stepping like a dancer who trusts the floor. It is a small thing to wind a clock. It is a large thing to decide you will listen when it starts again. The phone on the counter lit without sound. A message icon sat and waited. I let it. There will be calls and explanations and statements that want a reply. There will be the clean noise of paperwork moving through professional hands. There will be the slower noise of hearts deciding who they are when the room has stopped performing. I do not know where Nathan will sleep this week or next. I know where I will, in a bed that has learned my weight in a house that no longer asks me for disguise. The second cup cooled and I did not mind. I took one more sip and rinsed the mug, watching the thin ribbon of water erase a rim no one else would have seen. The kitchen kept its modest promises. Light on the counter, a chair that waited without protest. Not a palace, a place. There is a kind of wealth that the world cannot list. It is the kind you feel when the first breath after a long night does not hurt. I thought of my son the way a man thinks of a tree he planted. You can tend. You can protect. You cannot command the direction of the branches. His lessons will come without my voice in the room. He will carry yesterday in his bones for longer than he imagines. If he asks, I will speak plainly and not with anger. If he turns away, I will let him. Love that knows its responsibilities also knows its limits. Dignity is a guardrail. It keeps the road honest. When I sat again at the table, the light had climbed the wall to a place it visits only once each morning and then leaves alone for the rest of the day. The steam from the fresh pour rose and thinned and then disappeared, not because it had failed, but because it had completed its part. The cup warmed the room a little by existing. I listened for birds and for the far hum of a world returning to its tasks. I felt the chair take my weight and give me back balance. Some men want victory and some men want recognition. I have never been good at either. What I have always wanted is less glamorous and more difficult. I want the shape of my life to match the shape of my choices. Yesterday's noise has already begun to fade. What remains is the clean line that runs from a garage where 2 men guessed right to a kitchen where an old clock began again because a hand decided to tell it to. The door made a small sound as the house shifted and settled. A bird called from the gutter and a second answered from the telephone wire as if the world had been staged for a gentle ending. The mug stood where I left it, still working. The clock ticked. The room did not ask me to be anything. It let me be a man who had earned his rest. I sat inside that permission and let it become the day. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.